This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Welcome back to the show.
Christmas colors, and welcome
2-2 as here's Felito wide open in front, dancing, waiting, trying to tuck it in. He couldn't. He'll stay with it, feeding Erickson in for a shot. Stop, rebound. He scored! Welcome back, Joel Erickson, and the Wild are right back in front. It's 3-2 Minnesota.
Welcome back.
Sharks played up, not out. Zuccarello and a Boldy, a one-timer. Blocked out for Rossi, batted out in midair. Got it back in front. They score! A scramble in front, and the power play connects again. The Wild have a 5-4 lead.
Boy, huge goal for Minnesota. They just say...
Welcome back, Jules.
Zuccarello at center point, wristing a shot, knocked down in front. Rebound, they score! It's a hat trick for Joel Erickson. The power play connects again, and the Wild have a 6-4 lead.
Welcome back, Joel Erickson Eck.
Back of the net, Matt Boldy danced it free. Erickson Eck scores! It's a 4-goal game for Joel Erickson Eck, and the Wild have added the extra point. It's 7-4 Minnesota.
Welcome back, Joel Erickson Eck, and now let's win it with a thrill.
Spurgeon flicked it back, Kaprizov darts in, left it back, Zuccarello, left circle, cross ice, Kaprizov scores! What a play! What a shot! And Kirill Kaprizov wins it in overtime!
Oh, and what a point, Joe. An extra point here to get Minnesota 2 points.
Thank you, St. Paul.
Indeed. Welcome back, Joel Erickson Eck, and welcome back, Kirill Kaprizov, and welcome to 9 to noon. Well done, Joe O'Donnell. Well done, Tom Reed. Thank you, everybody, for listening to it last night on KFAN. How you feeling this morning after that one last night? State of hockey. 6 of the 8 from the 2 we have been begging to play for weeks. Calgary loses to Anaheim, and we jump the Blues in the wild card due to beating them three times this season. We got the regular season tiebreaker. The Flames have been fanned. The Minnesota Wild have captured a vibe, and now St. Louis all of a sudden cannot win, having lost 2 in a row. These just might be the good old days. Well done, beloved Wild. Massive one for the Howl this evening in Memphis, a game Anthony Edwards deemed is a must-win contest for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we will hear this one tonight on KFAN. That's the sports leader, your favorite radio station, FM 100.3, KFAN, 8:30 for the tip-tap. Alan Horton on the call, and Grizzlies Vikes Eric Hasseltine joins the Love Covenant around 9:35 to provide an adversarial update. 3 to go, and we need to win them all to hopefully get a week to chill before the NBA playoffs and prepare, quite possibly, for Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and the LA Lakers. Or if you don't come through on Anthony Edwards' must-win, well, then you got 2 to go, and you're completely on the grind with the play-in scenario. Currently, your Minnesota Timberwolves, all hail the How, would be heading to Golden State to play, Steph Curry and Jimmy the Bulldog in that first play-in game. So times are very tenuous right now. And the Grizzlies' Vox, Eric Hasseltine, joins the Love Covenant 30 minutes from now. Meanwhile,
hardcore football.
2 weeks from today is the National Football League draft. The preeminent draft opinion in the Love Covenant belongs to former Viking safety Corey Chavous. And Coach Ave joins us now from down Dallas way. And before we get into football, good morning, Corey. How are things?
Man, I'm doing well, PA. How are you doing this morning?
Quite well. Our hockey team put up 8 last night under the cover of darkness. The basketball team has a huge one tonight against Ja Morant. And speaking of basketball, and you're located in Dallas, those Mavericks fans, damn, man. I mean, they had to be super sad last night with Luka rolling into his old spot, whipping his former team, and then hugging Mark Cuban after the game. Those are tough times, right?
Yeah, it is, Paul. You kind of feel for the Mavericks fans because you didn't even really get to see the full, picture without Irvin playing for Dallas as to what the trade actually means for Dallas. And so that makes it even worse, especially with the way the Lakers kind of let Luka really control that first half. So I was a little bit disappointed for the Dallas fans, but I mean, the Lakers are still trying to find their way, I think, with I guess, his arrival over this last couple of months. I think they're starting to at least get some rhythm. I mean, they're all the way up to, 3 in the West, so right. Not bad.
Right, no doubt. And the Timberwolves have the Grizz tonight trying to get out of the play-in. And they very well could hook Luka and LeBron in the first round. Lastly, here in this basketball piece, because I know you watch a lot of games, your favorite team's the Pistons, but you're down Dallas way, and you liking the NBA. I'm sure you catch some Mavs games and some NBA and stuff. With Luka and LeBron, how far do you think the Lakers can take this in the postseason with what they've done?
I think for me, I look at more of potentially a Western Conference Finals exit. I think that would be what I'm thinking because if they do get there, I don't think they match up well with Oklahoma City. But that would just be if they were even able to get past Denver. I still have some hopes for Denver, but you can't discount the Rockets either. I know they've kind of just, been this team that has been good all season that you kind of discount whether or not they can do it in the playoffs. But I feel like they might be able to make some noise, and they might have an opportunity to get to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, the Rockets opened some eyes over the weekend for sure, man, when they went out to Golden State and beat a Red-Hot Warriors squad. So with Jalen Green and all those kids, Fred VanVleet and stuff, it looks like they may have put it together a little bit, huh?
Yeah, I think for them it's been about defense. They're defensive, and I think that's something me and you talked about with the Pistons a little bit. Their defensive intensity has picked up a lot, and I guess defense, that using that term with NBA basketball nowadays is relative.
Right.
But I think they have improved somewhat, or at least enough to complement what I think is a pretty explosive offense.
NFL Draft.
Will Campbell, the LSU offensive lineman. Now, Minnesota is not going to be sniffing him at 24, despite probably being interested in an offensive lineman. And with this Will Campbell, like you, I love him. But help me with this, all right? Will Campbell is being dinged for arms that are 32 and 5/8 inches long. All right. He's being dinged a little bit, even though I think he goes in the top 10. Now here's some context. All right. So these arms for Campbell, Louisiana State University, 32 and 5/8. We happen to like Christian Darrisaw a lot up here, specifically when he's healthy. His arms are 1 inch longer than Will Campbell's. So truly, does this make any kind of a difference when you're analyzing things?
I think probably the thing, I do think it makes a difference. I think you're more comfortable, particularly if you're taking an offensive tackle early, the longer that he is. And so, you have these benchmarks, and there's nothing wrong with that because you want to be able to keep guys off of you. And you've seen sometimes, even against Darius Robinson with Missouri, when guys get into him, and by the way, he played pretty well against Robinson, the first-round draft pick with the Cardinals last year. And the same thing when against Jared Verse. I was at that game. I went to both of those games to see him play. And I think you could kind of see sometimes where it forces you to re-anchor when a guy gets into your chest. And that, you're not going to be able to always re-anchor against a Jared Verse. But I think for the most part, I think he's done a good job of being able to, kind of work around that issue with his footwork. He doesn't get a lot of depth in a lot of his sets, but he's relatively patient. I think he reacts decently to inside movement. I think the wingspan is another factor.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have a big wingspan, and that's just, how much can you force that guy to go over the top? So that may be even more of an issue for him, the overall wingspan. Of course, that includes more than your arms. That's your shoulders as well when you're a 6'6" guy. So I think those things are very important when you're analyzing these tackles, and that's what he's getting dinged for.
Chavous.
Now, the producer of 9 to Noon, Eric Nordquist, has been excited for a day and a half to chat with you about some players and areas.
Yeah, good morning, Corey, and thanks again. I wanted to switch gears from the O-line to the tight end spot, and I've heard a lot. I mean, whether it's Tyler Warren at Penn State, Colston Loveland, these are names out of Michigan that people seem to know. But in terms of the Vikings and in terms of the idea of getting one of these good pass-catching tight ends, if that was a route they were going to go, trying to find out more about an Elijah Arroyo at Miami or Mason Taylor, super productive, 55 catches his last season for LSU. Is this, not the way that a draft a couple of years ago was touted with all those high-end tight ends, but is this a sneaky good draft for good pass-catching tight end guys?
Absolutely. I just have kind of completed my tight ends right now. I just finished up with Arroyo's film. One of the things about him, you didn't get to see him work out. You've had some injury issues, right?
Yeah.
You've had injury issues in back-to-back years, and that's kind of why you didn't get the productivity that you would expect out of a 4- or 5-star recruit. He was pretty highly touted coming in there, but, boy, he worked the seams. You saw that all the way up into that last game of the season in terms of being a vertical presence, and then he had a spectacular Senior Bowl week. I just feel like for Arroyo, he's got to become more committed as a blocker. I thought that from an inline perspective, or even on the move, there was some inconsistency there. I'm kind of one of the guys that's really smooth and probably is maybe the most similar to, in terms of style, to like a Travis Kelce type route runner is Terrence Ferguson.
Okay.
Now, you actually watch him play out of Oregon. You watch him play, you don't necessarily think that he's moving as fast as he is, but he's got sneaky, I guess, if you want to call it sneaky, when you got a 39-inch vertical explosion. He does an excellent job to me of being able to kind of have some pace in his routes. Doesn't do everything full speed, understands coverage well, was kind of a safety blanket for Bo Nix when he was there, had an excellent year this year with Dylan Gabriel. I think he's somebody to look out for. Then Harold Fannin Jr. at Bowling Green, more of a move guy. You're going to move him in a lot of spots. And those other two guys can do that as well. But I think those are some other names. And maybe you don't. Joshua Simon out of South Carolina, 25 career receiving touchdowns. And to me, I think he's been productive going all the way back to Western Kentucky. So you've got some tight ends. And Taylor, another move guy, a guy that they used a lot to determine coverage at LSU. So all those names you mentioned and a lot of other ones make it a pretty deep class to me.
Off the cuff, dang.
NFL Draft.
Specifically with the tight ends. Now, I don't know, when you say you mentioned you finished tight ends, I don't know how deep you go. I also am curious, you played in the league and you played at a high level, and this sport has been a big part of your entire life, Corey. How much lineage or family bloodline plays into it? I was skimming through the tight ends yesterday, and I found this cat from Syracuse, Oronde Gadsden II. His dad played for 6 seasons with the Dolphins. He caught Dan Marino's final TD pass in the NFL. Oronde II has to be just as good as Dad, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he tried to be, right. I thought he tried to be just as good, and he had a pretty, I would say, consistent career. He was the biggest factor, I think, prior to Kyle McCord getting there. He kind of shared some touches this year with some other receivers at Syracuse, but he's played some at the receiver position, period, right? And then they kind of transformed him into, a newer role, but I think at his size and with the movement capability, he was explosive enough. He ran in the 4.6 range on his pro day. And I think we talked so much about arm length. Me and Paul were talking about that earlier. Well, his arms are actually longer than Will Campbell. So you got that catch radius with them. I think he's a relatively, I would have to say, I wouldn't say explosive run after the catch threat, but certainly good enough. And he's really threatened more than just the seams of the field. He's done some things on the outside in school as well. So that's another name, and you're kind of making it exactly what we talked about, the depth of this class.
Corey Chavous, one of the better Vikings safeties over the last 20, 25 years, 9 to noon. He is the preeminent draft opinion in the Love Covenant, and it's always an honor to have him. Outside of the NFL draft for a second, Jack Jones. All right, I've become a little obsessed with Jack Jones, who was cut by the Raiders, who don't have, or at least haven't had, the greatest culture out 702 way over the last, let's say, 3, 4, or 5 years. Now, when Jones was here in the preseason last year, Antonio Pierce, for whatever the reason, decided to play Jones, Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, some of his better players. And I mean, Jones played with his hair on fire. Holy cow, he has 4 pick sixes during his career. Jack Jones, man, I mean, am I overstating the possibilities with Jack Jones, who's on the street right now? If you sign him, it doesn't mess with the compensatory pick situation. I kind of love him. What do you think about him?
All right, I think you kind of hit it on the head when you talked about that playmaking skill, Paul, because remember, I guess it was 2 Christmas days ago, he took one back to the house when that upset of Kansas City, takes one on the sidelines, takes it back to the house on Mahomes, and that's kind of per the norm for him. He's made a lot of those types of plays during his career. And then when you watch, kind of his development, played at a couple different schools, you talk about a big-time recruit, one of the biggest recruits out of that Cal area. USC, Arizona State had the Antonio Pierce connection. But the thing about him, the athleticism, he's just one of those guys who has an incredible instinctiveness on the field, and he almost sees things before they happen.
Right. It's
rare to see a corner pick off a screen and take it to the house. And I think he's had a couple of those during his career. Just one of those plays where the guy's eye speed, or at this, specifically him,
right,
is just incredible. So certainly agree with you about the playmaking capability.
Well, I mean, the Vikings with Byron Murphy Jr., Mekhi Blackman coming back from an ACL, but some new guys like Isaiah Rodgers and or Jeff Okudah. Now Dwight McGlothern, he made the team last year. He was mostly on the active roster, and they happened to like him a little bit. But with Isaiah Rodgers, the former Colt and Eagle last year, what do you think of Isaiah Rodgers?
Well, he's been, I think he was an underrated factor in terms of the contributions that he had last year in Philadelphia. And just a solid player. But in Indianapolis, he was probably one of their better, multi-purpose guys. Now, when he came out of school, one of the better kickoff returners, right? He was such a factor in the return game. And in the NFL, he's been a factor in the return game as well. So that's something else that you could potentially get from him, not necessarily know if that would be a role. Although last year in Philly, he averaged, over 28 yards a kick return as well. I think you've got some similarities from a playing style perspective to Jones. I just think he's a little bit more consistent of a cover guy than Jones.
And what was interesting to me is that the Vikings identified him the first Monday of the whole thing, the legal tampering bit. Got these big deals going all over the place, and then we roll in Isaiah Rodgers. So it's quite clear defensive coordinator Brian Flores is very infatuated with Isaiah Rodgers. And maybe that's the case with Jeff Okudah, all right? I've always found myself pulling for Okudah. He was so good in college, and then he had those injuries, played like 5 games over 2 years or something. And he's a strong physical guy who can be good in press man if he can just get around these injuries. So they're taking a flyer on Jeff Okudah. What do you think of that?
Well, I know this might be surprising, maybe my conclusion on what he can offer, but when you lose a guy like Trent Sherfield in terms of his special teams capability, I think that's where Okudah can come in and have an impact. I went to go see him play last year against Dallas. You talked about that Dallas, and he was playing gunner. And I think he has the effort and some of those attributes you just referred to, Paul, and on top of the fact that he still can run. And even going back in terms of an aggressive player, probably the best attribute he had coming out of school was the tackling. Probably the thing that's hurt him is a little bit, having some stiffness in terms of the hip flexibility when it just comes to opening and running at times. But when it comes to just flat-out aggressiveness and hitting people, that's one of the reasons why he can translate and beat a double team outside as a gunner. And that's because he was a high school safety or had played some at safety in high school. So Okudah, to me, that gives you a lot of flexibility in your defensive back room in terms of some of what you can get out of him on special teams.
Chavous.
Hey, speaking of the cornerback spot, Corey, as you start to analyze corners into this draft and the aggressiveness that you're talking about with the Jeff Okudah, what kind of characteristics and things are you looking for if I'm hunting a man corner in this draft, maybe specifically for the Vikings?
I think probably one of the things that's often underrated in man coverage is the instinct to be able to replace if you're having to support the run. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're in man coverage and your man actually goes, they have a cut split, and he goes to block the linebacker. Well, now that cornerback has to turn into the linebacker, right? Mm-hmm. He has to replace the linebacker in run support. And so there's certain corners that I feel like do that well in this draft. Somebody like a Noel Williams out of California. And I guess you could probably point to some others, but, he specifically stands out to me because, not only can he do that, but he is competitive in man coverage, part of one of the better defenses, I thought, on third down in the country last year at Cal. So Jahdae Barron is another guy out of Texas who I think has some capability in that area, although I project him more as a nickel or an inside cover guy. So I think those are the types of characteristics that you want to see for me if you're going to do some man coverage. The same thing applies to zone as well.
Similarly to the way I was looking at the tight ends, Corey, I look at the Vikings squad and they got picked 24. Then they got to chill. There's a lot of fear of missing out as they don't have another selection until 97. So if I'm checking out a Darian Porter from an Iowa State or a Jake Parrish from K-State, is this a similar position where if the Vikings are in the right spot at 97 on Friday night, that they could find themselves a corner that can compete and provide some depth and support in 2025?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, because you have to, I guess it depends on how quickly whatever the top corners rated by teams are, how quickly they go. Yeah. Because if you let's just say you want a nickel back and you want somebody with ball skills and maybe it's a step slow. Remember when your Pro Bowl corner that you guys have came out of school running 4.55, but it didn't really matter, right? So sometimes that stuff gets a little bit overrated at corner. I don't think it's always overrated. It's certainly important. But a Kobe Bryant might be there in round 4, or 5. You could end up maybe getting a Robert Longerbeam, another guy. These guys are more nickel projections maybe initially. Okay. Bilal Cone out of Western Michigan. I think some of those names, are later names. And I don't think Darian Porter will be there at 97. A lot of the people I've talked to, they're pretty high on him in terms of the upside. So, but, I mean, he could be, but and if he is, I think you'd run to the podium. To grab him.
For the Vikings at or around 24,
Thank you, Fargo.
I mean, I've really talked myself into Gray Zabel. And after, when people like you talk about how well, or specifically you and like my man Jordan Reed, how well somebody does at the Senior Bowl and like they win the Senior Bowl week. If you look back over the last X amount of years, those players who people like you are saying win the Senior Bowl week, they're almost always good in the NFL. And that was the case with Gray Zabel. So if Zabel is not available realistically around 24, say he goes in the high teens or the teens or something because people fall in love with him, are there interior offensive linemen around 24 you would suggest, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it really kind of depends on how high you have a guy like Tyler Booker out of Alabama. But for me, the number one interior lineman that I would consider at that spot, who I feel like is a type of first round or second round type talent, would be Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. And here's why. I feel like Jackson did a lot in terms of this whole Ohio State coming back and win the national championship, because when Simmons went down, he was able to slide out the left tackle. And he's competed for years against these Mason Grahams and Kenneth Grants. You've seen him compete against higher level competition. That should give you some comfort with him inside. He's played at a high level at guard. And then when you are able to just at the whim's notice slide outside the tackle, those are the types of guys I would look for, that positional flex. I'm not saying he's going to play tackle or anything in the NFL, but he might be able to in a pinch. And I think his athleticism and also just his overall, I think he has pretty good power at the point of attack. He's an excellent run blocker, and the versatility is certainly in place.
All right, Coach Ave, lastly, because, you just know so many people in the NFL and you put so much time into this, man. What I'm getting at here, like the scouts that the regional scouts, and they put in all this time, to follow schools and analyze kids and have the sneaky chats about what they're like away from the field. Then we get close to the draft. Now, the coaches have other things going on, and they obviously will travel for pro days, and, they'll have top 30s and things like that. But, like, how does it work when scouts have huge opinions on players, and then, like, the coaches have bigger opinions, but haven't really done as much work as the scouts? Like, how does that work?
I think it's a very interesting dynamic, because the coaches are going to have to coach these players, right? So if they like somebody, you have to take that in consideration, right, Paul? So it's not like you're just going to discount, okay, this is who you actually want. I think there has to be somewhat of a, maybe just you got to meet somewhere in the middle is the best way to put it, in terms of, and a lot of times the scouts are going out on the road and they have a direction that's laid out from the top in terms of what we're looking for, in terms of our scheme, maybe if it's scheme specific that you're looking for. I think those are when you don't have as much of a difference or a debate, because you've already been out trying to find and scour for what best fits that scheme. And I think those are the situations where it happens the most seamlessly.
My man, love you very much and greatly appreciate you. Definitely will call you in a couple of weeks, right around the Monday up to the draft. Thank you for the time, Corey, and have a great day.
Yeah, much love, man. I appreciate y'all having me. Thank you so much.
See you, bud. That's Corey Chavous. On the field, bunch of interceptions, just one of the better safeties the Vikings have had around here over the last 20-some-odd years. Converted corner. He's from Aiken, South Carolina. Then he went to Vanderbilt. Corey's incredibly smart. And he was very good at Vanderbilt. Came into the NFL like 98 as a corner with the Arizona Cardinals. He bookended the great Aeneas Williams. But then he moved to safety. And he and Brian Russell, old schoolers will remember this. Down memory lane we go.
It's a good pair.
Yeah, that was a nice pair, man. They might have had like 15 interceptions combined one year, or 14, something like that around 04, man.
I love that now I can just hit him with a day 3 tight end.
The best.
So Gadsden bit, he knows that he switched from receiver to tight end. He knows how productive he was.
Talked about Jeff Okuda and the role he played in high school. He was a high school safety. Coach Ave. Damn.
Yeah, he's good, man.
NFL draft.
Good people.
Covenant claps for the Wild and the 8 goals.
Yes.
Covenant claps for the Timberwolves. Turn the frown upside down from the Milwaukee L the other night. That
Please.
was on the Fan at 8:30 this evening. And on that, Eric Hasseltine is the very talented radio voice for the Memphis Grizzlies. I've known him for quite some time, and we're going to catch up with him and get an adversarial update on what we can expect tonight. That's part of the Timber Tech What's on Deck set list, which includes Nacho Lieber's return at about 10:03. Nordo produces, and I'm Paul Allen. Good morning, and welcome to 9 to Noon at FM 100.3 KFAN, your audio leader for everything funky and fun.
P.A.
What happened? About ready to bounce back into action. Sitting here in an abandoned luncheonette, awaiting the arrival of the adversarial Vox this evening. Eric Hasseltine calls the games on the radio for the Memphis Grizzlies. After that, Vikes Bites, red light, green light, Vikes Bites. And then Nacho Lieber, News du Nord, back into the Wild festivities and speculation, an hour and 15 minutes from now. Then the great Kevin Lynch, former Mr. Basketball in the state of Minnesota, analyzes basketball, assumedly for profit, for the FanDuel company. And he'll be with us in studio about 11 o'clock to talk about that Wolves game on KFAN tonight at 8:30, and we're going to do exactly that right now. Eric Hasseltine, super talented radio play-by-play voice for the Memphis Grizzlies, joins us now. Eric, it's Paul Allen. How are you?
I'm good. You left out outstanding human being, mediocre baseball coach, and broken down old tennis player.
And philanthropist and Green Bay Packers fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I left all of those out.
We were trying to leave that one out so I don't get I don't get eggs thrown at me when I come to Minnesota, please.
Well, that's okay. And when the Grizzlies bounced the Wolves out of the postseason a few years ago.
Oh, stop it.
Man, having you in studio that one or two times, whatever it was, that was super cool. But obviously, some things would have to transpire in like round number 2 or whatever for these teams to meet, but they'll meet this evening, and and it's a big one tonight. I don't know what they're saying down Memphis way, but the way the Wolves just blew a 24-point second half lead at Milwaukee, getting outscored 35-8 at one point. I mean, they were in those high tops were in quicksand, man. I can't say I've ever seen anything like it. I would imagine, Vox, that you're probably feeling pretty good about the contest tonight, aren't you?
You know better than that. You know that
yes.
Teams that do have moments like that tend to come out pretty locked in. So it was wild because obviously the Grizzlies have had their struggles. Everybody knows about the relieving Taylor Jenkins of his coaching duties and a couple of staff members as well. And then you had just a brutal 3-game homestand. So they had a 3-game road trip that was broken up because of a couple days in between and an easy flight home from Detroit. And they went out and they took care of business. And so they started to kind of find their rhythm again. And we were in Charlotte, again, playing a team that's basically riding it out to try to get Cooper Flag. And I look at the score and I said, well, Minnesota's got this one, and so the standings will all stay the same. And then we get on the bus and I'm like, what just happened? And, that it does happen, but it stings this late in the season for sure. It's a really good team. The Wolves are good on the defensive end. All the numbers say that. Obviously a superstar player. So I'm looking forward to it. The narrative here, listening to stuff in the morning, is this is the next biggest game of the season. We had the quote unquote biggest game of the season against Golden State. They handled the Grizzlies that night, and now it is really for both of these teams. A win is huge. The Grizzlies have the tiebreaker by virtue of their 2 wins head-to-head with Minnesota in Minneapolis. So, for that matter, a win tonight is massive for them because it puts the Wolves 2 games behind them with 2 games to play. Were they to finish tied and nobody else tied with them, they would have the advantage. But for the Grizzlies, it's pretty simple. You win all 3 of your games and you're not in the play-in. And we're seeing that teams value that. That's why LeBron's playing back-to-backs and everybody, all their star players are playing back-to-backs. So, for every team. So it's a big one, and it's a big loss the other night for the Grizzlies, and a couple of people have touched on it nationally, but locally we've talked about it. Losing Jalen Wells to, Paul, you've seen some bad hits in the NFL and seen guys get just crumpled, and you're like, oh gosh, I just hope he's going to be all right.
It was terrible.
Be able to, when he hit the deck, that's the worst fall I've ever seen live.
Yep.
And when he didn't move, you're not thinking, boy, I hope he can make it back to the NBA court. Your first thought is, I hope he can walk again. You don't know where he landed, and he had no movement on the way out. And it's just a terrific kid. I mean, I know a lot of people say that about their players. This young man came in, has had a poise about him that just you don't see. And night in, night out, he defended the other team's best player. So that leaves you, if you want to talk basketball about it, who's going to take Anthony Davis? Or Anthony Edwards.
Yep.
Sorry, I had Anthony Davis on the brain with all the Luka talk yesterday. Who's going to take Ant tonight? That was the guy who would try to slow him down as best he could. He's still a rookie, and he has his moments, but he's not afraid of the moment. So that's a big loss. I think that's a big loss tonight, and I think this is going to be a fiery game. I think it's going to be a fired-up crowd, and it's no secret that these two teams respect each other, but they don't like each other. There's been some history, and so they're gonna go out, and I think it's one of those nights you look forward even a little bit more to doing the job that we love.
Box, we have an interim coach down there. Hide the women and children.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the name is Chavous. Isulo.
Watch your language in front of the lady, punk!
Hopefully I nailed it.
Tuomas Iasalo.
Okay, Tuomas Iasalo. What do you think so far, and how's he doing?
I think he's gone to, the right system, the hybrid of what his system was, and they brought in another assistant that's no longer with us, that they kind of changed the offense. This is more of what Coach ran when he was in Europe. There is a lot of high ball screens. There wasn't a lot of that in the early part of the year. It is based on space. You look at the Grizzlies offense early on, and they just weren't running pick and rolls. And now you have all these stats that say what you do and who shoots corner threes and all these things. I just know what I saw. What was being run was not the best system overall in terms of maximizing Ja Morant's abilities. Did it maximize every other player on the roster? Yeah. So you have to make that decision. What's better? But it's clear your superstar didn't seem to like not being able to get Zach Edey to set a massive screen and then roll to the basket and then create. And since they've really gotten a little bit more into just straight one system and not kind of a hybrid of coaches and the former assistant Noah LaRoche's system, Zach Edey's flourished. Ja's been much better. Now it's taken maybe a few touches away from Jaren Jackson, who was fantastic all year long. But he's just, it's not as many touches on the interior or finding him, but that will come, I think, with time. So everybody's good with it. The players like him. There's no doubt. It wasn't that the players didn't like Taylor Jenkins. I just think that, we see these things and, Denver turned around and said, here, you guys think you can shock the world? Hold our beer. We'll be fine. Let us show you what it's really all about. But, and it's tough to judge. You know this. It's tough to judge a team on a 3-game stretch. Miami is a below 500 team. They're fighting for the play-in. Detroit was a good team. He caught them on a back-to-back coming from Toronto, which is never an easy trip. And then you got a bad Charlotte team. So everybody's like, oh, the ship's fixed. Well, you just played 3 teams in the East, which you guys being in the West, us in the West, we know that the West is just better. It's not a knock on the East. The West has more talent top to bottom. So tonight's a really good test. Tonight's a really good test against a Minnesota team that, is been right there. And I think maybe some of the fans are a tad disappointed that they're not higher in the standings comparatively to where they were last year. Obviously, the trade is being scrutinized and microanalyzed a little bit. But, then again, the Mavericks said, hey, Minnesota, hold our beer, and took that away from them. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, man. I think Tuomas is a brilliant guy. He really does understand the game. It's a very different scenario for him. He's never been in this type of spotlight, even though he's been a head coach in Europe. This is a different level, and he's kind of joked about that. But as a guy that the players respect, and they definitely do. At least the narrative has been we really like Coach and really respect what he's done and what he's accomplished. I think he's got that locker room at this moment, and that's what matters most. Whether that's long term sustainable only time will tell. But right now, he's certainly got their ear.
Lastly, two-parter too for Eric Hasseltine, radio play-by-play voice for the Memphis Grizzlies.
Fox.
Ja Morant, the injuries. I mean, man, he's just been so in and out. So, how is he playing these days? And rookie Zach Edey, how's he getting along?
So let's start with Zach, because I think this has also kind of gone under the radar with this change. Zach has been fantastic in the last handful of games, including 21 rebounds in the game against Detroit, and then 19 against Charlotte, which was the first rookie since '93, who was Shaquille O'Neal, to have 40 or more rebounds in a 2-game span. And he got pulled with about 6 minutes to go in the game in Charlotte. And I don't think the Grizzlies have ever had a back-to-back 20-rebound game in their franchise history. And even Zach and the rest of the team are all looking up at the scoreboard going, yo, coach, he needs 1 rebound for 20. Let him go get it. And, everybody kind of joked about it. It wasn't anything serious, but he's been really good as of late. He's stayed much more around the dunker spot, which is that block on the opposite side of where the ball's, attacked into the lane. And he's not staying away from the basket the way the previous, the hybrid type of the offense had him doing. I think they're maximizing his ability. He's playing more. He's starting every game. They were trying to figure out some other things prior. And I get that. I get that's what you brought guys in to do. Losing Brandon Clark also shifted that to where, hey, we need you more now, big fella, than we did before. And he's answered the call. He's a stoic guy. He really wants to make, his mark in the NBA, not just as this, enormous human being, but as a good player. And I think that's respectable. So happy for Zach. And I think that you're going to continue to see that. It'll be an interesting matchup tonight with him and Gobert. He doesn't back down. He's not afraid of anybody. And he's, even gotten into some skirmishes with some, pretty tough dudes. So this will be a fun one to watch. And, when you go to Ja to answer the second part, he's playing his best basketball right now. I am of the camp that said I was shocked to see him back as early as he was from a torn labrum. Some guys say, it's not as big a deal for a basketball player. I still think it affects your shot. Desmond Bane had an oblique injury early, and he wasn't shooting but 32%. And I'm like, that's not Desmond Bane. That oblique injury is clearly affecting the shot. Well, I think the shoulder's got to affect the shot for Ja, because his three-point shooting has gotten better. He's getting the screens he likes to be able to do the things he's capable of. Obviously, whenever it comes up with Ja, you're gonna talk about the off the court, and now with the fine and all these things. I think it his best, it's just, hey, let's just play basketball. And hopefully we can get to that point for him. But to be fair, I think part of it is he's got to, try to keep himself out of that spotlight. But if that's how he wants to handle the situation, I'm not going to knock him for it. You know how these guys are. They're prideful human beings, some of the most on the planet. And if they feel like someone's, kind of holding them back, they're going to push back. And whether that's good or bad, we'll let that play out. But when he's going and he's, in his groove, there are not many people that can do the things he can do. He had an alley-oop in Charlotte that I don't know how he caught it. I don't know how he finished it. I don't even know that there's many people in the league, maybe other than Ant or a couple other leapers, that could have gotten it. And he did it and made it look easy. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is just insane. And, I think that with everybody, there's a maturation process where you get through the things that are bothering you or frustrating you, and you get to the point where you're just like, all right, I know I'm one of the best players in the world, and I'm just going to go do that. And, if he gets there, then he's really, really dangerous. If he doesn't, he's still really dangerous, and you just might have the occasional time where he gets a little flustered and he pops off and things happen. But right now, I think he's playing at a very, very high level. And if you bring, Jaren into that mix the way he's been playing, and Dez into the mix the way he's been shooting, this team can be a real tough out come postseason time. Whether that's play-in game or whether that's an actual series remains to be seen.
My man, that was terrific. We will be listening to Alan Horton on KFAN this evening and thinking about our one of our favorite Voxes, Eric Hasseltine. Thank you for the time, brother. Have a good day.
Thanks for having me, my man.
See ya. Eric Hasseltine, radio voice of the Memphis Grizzlies. 8:30 tonight, KFAN. We all hail the... Vikes Bites are...
Man,
Vikes Bites, 9 to noon, is presented by 1,000 Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef. You can shop online. A box of meat will show up at your doorstep. We're talking about nutrient-dense beef, healthy beef, natural beef, Clearwater, Minnesota beef. You can get it at Coburn's, Kowalski's, local co-ops as well. They're proud sponsors of Gophers Athletics. Thank you, Matt, and everybody at 1,000 Hills. I want to start here. We've talked with Corey Chavous first hour. We got Lieber around the corner. It's NFL draft. We're 2 weeks away, so we got to dial in here. But I will ask you this, just more in terms of finished product with limited draft capital. Regardless of what happens at 24, you got 97, you got a couple picks on Saturday at the moment. Stick and pick, trade back, whatever. Is there a particular position? And maybe this, you said with Corey, you talked yourself into Gray Zabel, so maybe it's walking away without an O-lineman of some sort in the draft. Like, that's just unacceptable. And, is there a position, and maybe that's the answer, that you would say, if this draft goes by and they haven't grabbed somebody at this spot that could potentially fill X role, that you would be disappointed by when we're recapping late Saturday and Monday, 9 to noon after the draft festivities?
Wow, good question. Nice twist to it. I can't say I've gotten that one over the last few weeks with doing interviews and podcasts and stuff. Wow. Well, it yours truly does not, and 9 to noon is not the radio show that pretends to have all the answers with the technique and stylings and individual exploits for players like Gray Zabel and Booker and so on and so on. We have people in the stable who matter from an opinion standpoint because they generally always are right. So we take what we feel we know.
Yeah.
And then we put that computation in, and then we tap on people. And then that gets me to my answers. So in other words, around 24, it's not going to be for me, I can't believe they didn't take this guy at 24.
Right.
So, and because that's so easy and lazy for people to do. Because if they're right, you're going to hear about it. And it's going to take a season and a half to determine if somebody's right or wrong.
Well, and not just that, specifically in the first round, you're going to be right about a lot of first-round prospects that go and have productive NFL careers, certainly.
Yes. Yeah. So if for instance, I will have 2 weeks from today, when we do the draft party show beginning at like 6 o'clock, I'll have a list of 4 or 5 names for offensive linemen, defensive tackles / linemen, and secondary players.
Yeah.
I'll play off that. But then we have Bursich and Lieber, 2 former players who are elite when it comes to film watching of these players. Then we have Paul Charchian, who from an analytical standpoint, he hits that bent more than us 3.
Yes.
So I think you got steam guy, you got film guys, you have analytics guy. So then we just kind of put that whole thing together to come up with hopefully the right answer. But really, to answer your question, I don't see it not being an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, or some form of secondary player.
Yeah.
Now the proverbial fly in the metaphorical ointment here is I do really, really, really believe all the right people talking about the depth of the running backs in this draft. Now, last year we had all those quarterbacks. Defensive player didn't go to a win, like 14, something like that.
Yeah, 15 or 16 to the Colts. Latu.
Okay, that's not going to happen this year. I mean, that's an outlier. That's an anomaly.
Yep.
It's going to be more of a meat and potatoes kind of draft where, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, quarterback, tight end, DB, wide receiver. And running back. It's going to be all over the place. So I don't sense there are going to be runs on players, where you got to think, damn, man, 3 offensive linemen just went consecutively. We better get up there to 19 to get Donovan Jackson.
Yeah.
So I don't envision that happening that way. Excellent question. But I think this is going to kind of be a status quo draft for the teams.
No, I like it. And part of the reason I went down the tight end route with Corey, and I'm trying to fight it. It was kind of the way we were talking about it yesterday.
I'm glad you did that.
We have a handful of names, and we're getting closer.
Yeah.
The more that I look into I kind of don't want the Vikings, and I'm not talking about 24, but I kind of don't want the Vikings to leave the draft without one of these tight ends. Right. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to fight that, and ultimately the finished class in itself will tell the whole story. Yeah. But whether it's a running back option, I know we got Mason, I know we got Aaron Jones, loving that tandem. Yeah. But it's kind of one of those things where I'm starting to hear, man, all these tight ends are super athletic and catch. Wow, there's 15 running backs that probably have an NFL career in front of them. I kind of don't want to leave the draft without at least one of those guys to compete in camp. So that's kind of 2 weeks in front of the draft. That's where my head's kind of going outside of just sticking and picking at 24.
With you, but, I stick by what we and a lot of people have said. I mean, but we've gotten a little more loud with it this year than we have in past years. The players the Vikings select en masse have to be better than the totality of what's been drafted the last 3 years.
That is correct.
So it's like Brian Asamoah still on the team, all right, because his special teams prowess has gotten quite good. But, where he was taken as an inside linebacker who I think they counted on, but now we're spending money on Cashman and spending money on Eric Wilson and so on. And like Jordan Hicks was here and stuff like that. Caleb Evans. I mean, it's just, we know all the names. They've done so well in free agency and this year should be no different. That now it's time to start hitting on somebody sneaky on a Saturday or deep on a Friday. You identified. It's like, whoa, the Vikings gave up this from Saturday and one pick next year to get up to, let's say, 49. And they take this tight end from Stanford. Well, then that guy has to be good.
Yes.
So the moves you're making... Well, McCarthy and Dallas Turner have to be good. McCarthy has to fit immediately and he's a born leader, but lead it immediately.
Yep.
But then, like with this year, hit on 24, go on and make a move, identify somebody you love, no matter the position, and be right on it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Just regardless of the spot, just be correct. Just have a guy that sticks and isn't going to cost us $50 million in free agent cash in the next 2 years.
Right.
And everything's going to be just fine. That's Vikes Bites.
And here comes Nacho Lieber, Ben Lieber. It's 10 o'clock, and Ben's back. Excellent to have him back 2 weeks in front of the draft. Nacho time around the corner on KFAN.